I don't know how many people know this, but it's a shocking thing. In inheritance, for which I'm fighting a case very soon in the Supreme Court, Muslim women get only 1/6 what the boys get. Nobody talks about this obscurantism of Islam. They'll give us lectures every day on Hinduism and our obscurantism. The fact is that India is a democracy and a secular country only because we are a Muslim. We are not a Muslim country, but we are a Hindu majority country. No Islamic country today has democracy. People say Indonesia has, but I don't really consider it to be a full-fledged Islamic country. You know that 10,000 rupee note in Indonesia has Ganapati on it. I was in an international conference. I asked the finance minister, how did you put Ganapati there? He said, you see, in 1997 there was a financial crisis and our rupiah was coming down very fast. We don't know what to do. So somebody came and said from Bali, some Hindu came and told us, you put Ganapati's photo and rupee note and it will stop. He said, we didn't have any other method, so we put Ganapati's photo. And it stopped. The decline stopped. In the middle of Jakarta, there is Sri Krishna sitting in his chariot giving a lecture to Arjuna. Their airline is called Garuda. Ours is called Air India. It's a secular name. Exactly. Yes. So they keep their names are also Sanskrit names. The Megha Putri and was a prime minister or president. So in effect, I don't mind. In fact, in India, we welcome Hindu or Muslims because they are, after all, the same DNA as us. But only one condition: please accept your ancestors are Hindus. If your ancestors are Gori and Ghazni, then there is only one way you can go, and that is across the border. So therefore, how can we accept people who say that we are descendants of people who butchered us, raised our temples to the ground and built masjids on it? So therefore, we want to integrate. We have no problem with the Parsis because the Parsis are completely integrated with us. When they came, Dwarka Shankara asked them, will you be wearing Persian clothes? They said, no, we'll take to Gujarati clothes. Even today, Parsi women wear sari with the Gujarati way. Then they said, will you eat cow? They said, no, we will not eat cow. Today, no religious Parsi eats cow. So they have completely integrated themselves. The same way, we are not going to interfere in the religious practices of anybody because that's Hindu. We believe all religions lead to God. But we say that culturally, we are one people. And it must show itself. And Hindu culture means what? The relationship between man and woman, relationship between father and son, daughter and mother, all these relationships, how we are totally different. You know that what a difference there is between the family atmosphere in India and the family atmosphere in the United States amongst the white Americans. There is a totally different approach. So we want this family system, these values. We have certain values which the world, unless it's pointed out, people don't even know. When I came as a student to the class to take my PhD, my first class, my neighbor was by my side was sitting a white American. And he said, I have one question to ask you. Before the professor came, we had some chit-chatting. So he asked me one question. I said, what? He said, why did you people accept Mahatma Gandhi as your leader? So I said, what's wrong with that? He said, because the man is not properly dressed, you see. How can I accept a leader who is not properly dressed? And the thought about it is a fact. The man just had one langoti and he was going around with his bare body and, and people, all millions following him. Then I thought the others also, all are sadhus and sannyasis. Look at the Pope, he's so well dressed. Look at the Imam of Makkah, how well dressed he is. But all sadhus only Bhagwa Koda. So we venerate them. So I asked the Americans jokingly, supposing Mahatma Gandhi came and claimed leadership here, what would you do? He said, we'll put him in jail for indecent exposure. Now, shows the cultural difference there. That we have never made money, I mean historically, now I'm not talking about today. Today there's a lot of vikritis, as they say in Sanskrit, I mean certain distortions. But we have never in our history, in our culture, ever said that a man's social status depended on how much wealth he had. Whereas in this society, in the American society, that is the main thing. Because we believe that if wealth becomes the main only criteria, it will lead to greed, and greed will lead to corruption. So therefore, even if you have money, you have social status when you are philanthropic, when you do philanthropy, when you give away your money beyond what you need. So these are the values for which we have to fight for and stand up for. Today we face major threats. Threats of westernization. There are many good values of westernization which I would welcome and adopt myself. One is punctuality. We are the most unpunctual people. Respect for contracts. If the Americans give you a word, they will, if they want to break the contract, they will tell you, I want to break it and I'm willing to make compensation for it. They won't say that my grandmother is ill, so I could not meet the deadline. And you know, I had a friend whose grandmother died 6 times. That's world record. So, therefore, there are many Western values which I will accept. But the core value that we will not recognize wealth as the determining factor for your social status. What we will recognize as the highest form of living is knowledge and besides knowledge, your sacrifice. And that is the section whom we had originally said were Brahmins. Brahmins had nothing with them except the ability to teach and their sacrifice in the sense they had no wealth, they had no property, they had no weapons. But the Raja had to go to him and seek his sanction before he could take any major decision like declaring war. The monarchy in Europe, the king was everything, but not in our system, because we believed in decentralization of power. And in that decentralization, birth was not a factor. Because if birth was a factor, then Veda Vyasa could never have been a Maharishi who wrote the Ramayana because his mother was a fisherwoman. Nor could Vishwamitra have been the Rishi of Rishis because his father and mother were Kshatriyas. So there was never a birth factor, but this has become one of the what we call as the degenerations of our caste system, and therefore today it divides us, and therefore we must get rid of it. And you can have it for perhaps in your marriage or something like that, but even that is not correct, because genetically the closer you marry, the more genetic deformities come. So in fact, people should freely should not anymore regard caste as a factor in marriage. So ultimately we should now move towards a society which is united as Hindus. You say, why can't you say united as Indians? I said, yes, first let us take 80% of the population, and then remaining 20%, we don't have, it's not a Hindu in that sense, because Sikhs are there. Sikhs have a distinct relationship, distinct religion, but the Sikhs came out of us, and we'll never forget the Sikh community sacrifice to keep the Hindus alive in the Guru Tegh Bahadur and Guru Gobind Singh. The same thing with Jains, Buddhists. We have no, to call them Hindu, we may call them Hindu, they may not want to be called Hindu, doesn't matter. But they have come out of us, and therefore we accept them as theirs, and their main concepts and tenets are the same as Hinduism. And therefore we have no difficulty whatsoever. And they are not also a proselytizing type religion. And therefore there is complete harmony between Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims and all, Hindus, Sikhs, Jains and Buddhists, and even Parsis, because of the non-combative situation. The Jews also, we have no problems at all. They are very microscopic numbers, but the fact is that we had a Hindu-Jew dialogue in which I participated. They had only one clarification to seek. They said, do you have polytheism? I said, no. Swami Dayanand Saraswati, who is nowadays, today in a hospital near in Pennsylvania, he had led that discussion, and he beautifully argued that ours is one God in several manifestations for simplicity, for ease of teaching the theology. But ultimately Ishvara is a one God only. And therefore the Jewish rabbis accepted that and said there's no fundamental difference between Judaism and Hinduism. And therefore from then on we have been having continuous Hindu-Jewish faith dialogue. So we